It was the kind of winter morning that bit at your skin even before you stepped outside. Amanda wrapped her scarf tighter as she walked down the familiar stretch between her apartment and the bakery where she grabbed coffee every Friday. The sidewalk was still wet from last night's rain, and the sky hung low and gray, casting the whole city in a dull, tired hue. She wasn't thinking about anything in particular, just another Friday, another long week behind her. But as she approached the corner near the park, she saw him again. The same homeless man who had started appearing there 2 weeks earlier. He always sat cross-legged, a worn backpack at his side, hands buried deep into his coat. Unlike others she'd seen, he didn't hold a sign, didn't ask for change. He simply stared at the ground as if waiting for something that had never arrived. That morning, Amanda slowed her steps. There was something about the way he sat. So still, so contained. Something oddly familiar. Her chest tightened without reason. She reached into her purse and pulled out the extra croissant she had grabbed on impulse. "Hey," she said gently, crouching down a few feet from him. The man didn't look up at first. Only after she extended the bag toward him did he raise his head, just slightly. His face was tired, lined, his beard uneven, his eyes shadowed, but something behind them flickered. "Thank you," he said, voice rough. She smiled, unsure why her heart was racing. "You're welcome." She didn't recognize him. At least, that's what she told herself. Maybe it was just guilt, or compassion, or both. But when she turned to leave, something made her stop. She turned back. "What's your name?" she asked. The man hesitated, his lips parting slightly, as if the question had knocked something loose inside him. Then he whispered a name, just one word, and Amanda's legs nearly gave out beneath her. Because it wasn't just a name. It was his name. The name of the man who had disappeared from her life 18 years ago without a trace. The name she had tried to forget. The name of her father. Amanda didn't speak, couldn't. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Just silence, thick and immediate, like the world had muffled itself around her. The name he'd said kept echoing inside her skull, pushing against memories she'd locked away for nearly 2 decades. She took a small step backward, instinctively putting distance between them, her heartbeat now thudding in her ears. The man noticed her reaction, and for a second he seemed to brace himself, like he had seen this moment coming. His hand trembled slightly as he pulled the croissant closer, eyes flicking up to meet hers, not with confidence, but with guilt, heavy guilt, and recognition. Amanda's breath caught in her throat. "That's not your name," she said, almost daring him to take it back. But he didn't. He just looked at her deeply, and something unspoken passed between them. The curve of his brow, the tilt of his chin, the same dimple that used to appear when he laughed, though now hidden beneath, a beard and sorrow. She remembered being 6 years old, sitting on his shoulders during parades, his laugh loud and warm like summer. Then one day, he was just gone. No letter, no funeral, no closure. Just the sound of her mother crying behind locked doors and telling her to forget. Amanda shook her head as if trying to dispel a dream. "No," she whispered. "You left us. You died." Her voice cracked under the weight of 2 decades. The man lowered his gaze. "I didn't die," he murmured. "I just disappeared. For reasons I thought were right at the time." Amanda staggered back another step, stunned by the calm in his voice. How could he speak so plainly? How could he just sit there, living on the street, as if the life he'd abandoned hadn't left scars? The wind picked up, rustling the leaves around their feet. Amanda crossed her arms tightly, not from cold, but to hold herself together. "You can't just come back like this," she said. "Not like this." The man nodded slowly. "I know, I didn't plan to." And in that moment, neither of them knew what to say next. Because everything that should have been spoken had been left unsaid for 18 years. And now, it was all crashing down at once. Amanda stood frozen on the sidewalk, as if moving would unravel her entire sense of reality. People passed around them, unaware that a life-altering moment was unfolding just inches away. The city didn't pause, didn't care, but Amanda's world had just shifted in a way that made everything feel foreign. Her father, this man she believed dead, grieved in silence, cursed in anger, was sitting on the pavement, looking smaller than she ever remembered. Her mind flooded with questions she couldn't form, and memories she couldn't ignore. Where had he gone? Why had he never written? What kind of father disappears into the cracks of the world and lets his daughter believe he's dust and ash? She wanted to scream at him, shake him, ask if he knew the damage he left behind. But she said nothing. The lump in her throat wouldn't allow it. Instead, she stared at him, her eyes searching his face for any sign of the man she once adored. And strangely, heartbreak wasn't the only thing she felt. There was shame. Her own shame. For not recognizing him sooner. For walking by him all those other mornings with nothing more than a glance. She had seen him. Really seen him. But not seen him. Her father had been invisible in plain sight. "What do you want from me?" she asked finally, her voice trembling, but steady. He looked up again, and in his eyes was something she didn't expect. Fear. Not the fear of being judged, but the fear of being unwanted. "Nothing," he said softly. "I just wanted to know if you'd remember me. Before it was too late." The words hit her like cold rain. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He wasn't even asking for a place in her life. Just recognition. A moment of being human again in the eyes of the one person he'd failed the most. Amanda felt the warmth drain from her fingers. She didn't know what to say, or how to feel. All she knew was that something broken had just been unearthed. And whether she liked it or not, it had her name carved all over it. She turned away, but her legs didn't move. Because the past wasn't behind her anymore. It was sitting on a sidewalk, holding a croissant, and waiting. Amanda didn't sleep that night. The walls of her apartment, usually a refuge, felt too tight, too silent, like they were holding in more than just air. She paced the living room in loose circles, one hand clutching her phone, though she had no idea who she'd even call. Her mother? Impossible. That door had been nailed shut years ago. Friends? How do you explain that the man you fed a croissant to is the same man who tucked you in at night before vanishing into nothing? The image of him sitting there, wrinkled, worn, and still, wouldn't leave her mind. She had replayed his words 100 times. "I just wanted to know if you'd remember me. Before it was too late." The sentence felt rehearsed, yet sincere. There was something about the way he said, "before it was too late," that tugged at something raw inside her. Was he sick? Dying? Or just waiting to disappear again? Her thoughts bounced between anger and longing. Part of her wanted to pretend it never happened, to go back to her routine and forget the man who had chosen silence over fatherhood. But another part, deeper and quieter, ached for answers. Real answers. Amanda reached for the dusty box in her closet, the one she hadn't opened since college. Inside were faded photos, a few torn drawings she had made as a child, and a birthday card she used to stare at when she missed him. She pulled out the photo of her, age 5, sitting on his lap in front of a Christmas tree. His eyes in the photo matched the ones from the sidewalk. Tired now, but unmistakable. She ran a finger over his face, trying to reconcile the man in the photograph with the man in the cold. "Why now?" she kept asking herself. "Why show up like that? Why let me think you were dead for so long?" The questions circled her mind like vultures, never landing, just watching. Amanda stood at her window, looking out into the black streets. Somewhere out there, he was sleeping on concrete, and in her chest something strange stirred. Not forgiveness, not yet, but maybe the first breath of curiosity. the first fracture in her armor. The next morning, Amanda found herself walking without purpose, her legs moving faster than her thoughts could catch up. She didn't plan to return to that corner near the park, but somehow her steps curved in that direction like a magnet pulling her back to something unfinished. The streets were quieter on Saturdays, and the bakery hadn't yet opened. The bench where he usually sat was empty. At first, she felt relief. Maybe it was better this way. Maybe fate gave her one glimpse, one last goodbye cloaked in surprise, and now it was done. But as she turned to leave, her eyes caught a familiar shape hunched near the alley, shielding himself from the wind. The same coat, the same backpack, and beside him, a folded paper cup with a few coins rattling inside. Amanda hesitated. It would have been easy to walk away again, but she didn't. She approached slowly, feeling the weight of every step. "You're back," she said, and her voice betrayed more emotion than she meant to show. He looked up. His eyes, those damn eyes, searched hers like a man trying to read a language he'd long forgotten. "Didn't think I would see you again," he said, not with bitterness, but with surprise. "I wasn't sure either," she replied, biting her lip. Silence filled the space between them. Then, cautiously, she sat on the edge of the curb beside him. "I don't know why I'm here," she confessed, staring straight ahead. "Maybe I'm just trying to understand." He nodded, as if that was the most he could hope for. "I left because I thought I had to. I thought I was doing the right thing." Amanda turned to him, her brow furrowed. "The right thing? Abandoning us?" His face tightened. "It's not an excuse. It's just, I was sick, Mandy. Mentally. And I thought I was dangerous to you. To your mom. I thought disappearing would protect you." The name, Mandy, hit her like an echo from a distant room. No one had called her that in years. She stared at him, unsure whether to cry or scream. "You let me believe you were dead." He looked down. "Because I was. To myself." And for the first time, she saw something crack in him. Not just guilt, but shame. A man who had punished himself quietly for 18 long years. Amanda sat in silence, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, eyes locked on the cracks in the pavement. Part of her wanted to ask everything: where he went, what he did, why he never called. But the other part, the one that had learned to live without a father, hesitated. Because she wasn't sure if she wanted to reopen all those wounds or just finally let them scar over. Her father leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. "I used to watch from a distance," he said quietly. "Birthdays, first days of school. I'd stay across the street, never close enough for you to see. Your mom made it clear she didn't want me around." Amanda's eyes narrowed. "So you respected her wishes but not mine?" He nodded slowly. "I didn't think I had the right. Not after what I did." His voice cracked, and for a moment he looked less like a stranger and more like the man who once kissed her goodnight and promised monsters weren't real. "I kept a photo of you in every shelter, every place I stayed. I knew I didn't deserve to reach out, but I never stopped loving you." The words hung in the air, heavy and uninvited. Amanda didn't know what to do with them. Love wasn't a word she associated with his absence. It felt misplaced, like offering flowers at a grave you dug yourself. "Love?" she repeated bitterly. "Do you know how many years I spent wondering what I did wrong? If I had said something? If I pushed you away somehow?" Her voice rose, sharp and wounded. "You let a little girl carry a burden she was never meant to hold." Her father didn't flinch. He nodded again, eyes glistening. "And I carry that too. Every day." The vulnerability in his voice chipped something inside her. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a shift. A tiny, dangerous crack in her resolve. She hated him, but she also wanted to understand him. And that tension, that unbearable in-between, kept her sitting there longer than she meant to. "If I ask, You something? She said slowly. Will you promise not to lie? He looked at her with that same wounded softness. Anything, he said. And just like that, the conversation became something else. No longer about the past, but about the truth still buried inside it. Amanda waited a long moment before speaking. Her question wasn't easy to form, not because she didn't know what to ask, but because she feared the answer. She turned her head slightly, eyes narrowing as they settled on his worn profile. "Did you ever want to come back?" she asked finally, voice low, almost drowned by the hum of the distant city. Her father sighed, a sound that carried the weight of years lost and chances missed. "Yes," he said without hesitation. "More times than I can count. But every time I almost did, I'd look at myself, and I'd see a man you wouldn't recognize, wouldn't be proud of. I was ashamed." Amanda clenched her jaw. "And so you chose the easier path, disappear, and let me grow up believing I wasn't worth staying for?" He looked down. "It wasn't easier. It destroyed me." His voice wasn't defensive. It was hollow, like someone who had replayed his failures every night and still hadn't found a version that hurt less. Amanda stared ahead, blinking hard. Her mind was torn between the memories of a man who carried her on his shoulders and the image of the stranger sleeping under cardboard. "What happened to you?" she asked. "What turned you into this?" He hesitated, then spoke carefully. "After I left your mother, things spiraled. I lost my job, then my apartment. I made stupid choices. Got involved with people I shouldn't have. I was angry, confused, and I didn't know how to rebuild without hurting you both even more." Amanda's hands tightened around her knees. "So you disappeared, just like that?" He nodded. "I thought vanishing would leave fewer scars than staying broken in front of you." A pause stretched between them. Then Amanda said something she didn't expect herself to say. "I don't know if I hate you, or if I'm just terrified that I don't." Her voice cracked slightly. "Because if I don't hate you, that means I still care, and I don't know what to do with that." Her father didn't answer. He simply lowered his head, the silence saying more than words could. And in that shared quiet, something raw and human unfolded. Not forgiveness, not yet, but recognition. The painful kind that breaks something open just enough to let light in. The rest of the city moved on without them. Cars passed. A mother pushed a stroller across the street. Somewhere a dog barked. But Amanda remained still, like the world had narrowed to this stretch of sidewalk where the past was no longer hiding and the future refused to begin. She looked at him, not as a ghost from her childhood, not as a broken man wrapped in layers of regret, but as something more complicated, a mirror she never wanted to face. "You know what's strange?" she said softly. "I've built my life around your absence. I don't mean just moving on, I mean, I made it part of me. I became someone who didn't need anyone, who didn't believe in family or promises or staying." Her voice wavered. "And now you're here, and suddenly all those walls I built don't feel so strong anymore." He didn't speak, but his posture shifted. He listened, really listened. Amanda drew a shaky breath. "There were moments I hated you. Times when I told myself you were dead, just so I could grieve and be done. But other times," she hesitated, her throat tightening. "I used to dream you'd come back, not like this, clean-shaven, standing at the door with flowers or something. Stupid, I know." Her father smiled faintly, a sad curve of his lips. "Not stupid," he murmured. "Hope isn't stupid." Amanda's eyes glistened, but she blinked the tears away. "It became easier to be angry, easier to paint you as the villain. Because if I saw you as anything else, I'd have to feel everything I locked away." He looked at her then, really looked. "I never asked for your forgiveness," he said gently. "I wouldn't dare. But if you'll let me, I'd like to show you who I am now. Not to erase the past, Just so you can know the truth from me, instead of the story silence told you." Amanda sat back, arms crossed over her chest. She didn't answer, but she didn't walk away either. Something in her stayed grounded, tethered by a thread she didn't know was still there. And maybe that was the beginning, not of healing, but of hearing the full story, in his voice, while he still had the strength left to tell it. They moved to a quieter bench, tucked beneath a tree that filtered the sun into soft golden threads. Amanda kept a careful distance, arms still folded, but her body angled toward him now, a subtle shift, but a real one. Her father reached into his backpack, slow and deliberate, pulling out a small weathered notebook. Its edges were frayed, the cover smudged with fingerprints and years. "This is all I have left," he said. "Everything I couldn't say I wrote here. Not for sympathy, not even expecting to be found. Just to get it out of me." He handed it to her with hesitation, like it was fragile, like maybe she was too. Amanda took it with careful hands, her fingers brushing the faded ink on the cover. For Amanda. Her name. Her actual name, not the one he once called her in childhood. Something in her chest fluttered. "You carried this?" she asked. "Even on the street?" He nodded. "It stayed with me through shelters, parks, nights under bridges. It was my anchor, my confession, my way of holding on to a piece of you without ruining it again." Amanda didn't open it yet. Instead, she placed it on her lap, the weight of it grounding her in ways she didn't expect. "Why didn't you send it? Mail it? Leave it at the door?" He exhaled slowly. "Because I didn't think I deserved to ask you to read it. I figured the pain I caused earned me silence." For a long time, neither of them spoke. Just two shadows sitting in the memory of something broken. Finally, Amanda asked, "Do you still drink?" The question came out sharper than she intended, but he didn't flinch. "Not in 10 years, he said quietly. "I went through a program. I stayed clean. But by then, I thought too much time had passed. I didn't think I had the right to interfere in your life anymore." Amanda traced the edge of the notebook with her thumb. "You didn't interfere," she whispered. "You left." Her words hung there like glass, brittle, true, and then she looked at him. Really looked. Not the version she remembered. Not the man life had wrecked, but the one still trying even now. And for the first time, her silence wasn't distance. It was the beginning of a fragile, unfinished conversation. Amanda waited until she was alone to open the notebook. It wasn't distrust. It was self-preservation. Because part of her still feared that reading his words in front of him would mean letting too much slip through too soon. That evening, she sat on the edge of her couch, staring at the worn cover like it was both sacred and dangerous. When she finally opened it, the first page was a letter, dated years ago. The handwriting was shaky, but unmistakably his. "Dear Amanda, you have every right to hate me. And maybe when you read this, you still will. But I can't leave this world without telling you who I was and who I'm still trying to be." She read slowly, each sentence like a careful step across fragile ground. The notebook wasn't just an apology. It was a raw, unfiltered confession. Scattered memories filled the pages. He wrote about when she was 5 and he used to push her on the swings, how she'd yell "higher" with a grin that split her face. He described crying the first time he saw her sleeping alone in her crib, but the shadows crept in too. The rehab stints, the relapses, the nights he was afraid of becoming the kind of father who might raise a hand. The day he chose to disappear, not out of hatred, but out of terror, a belief that leaving was the only way to protect her from the version of himself he feared becoming. Amanda closed the notebook for a moment, pressing it to her chest. Tears slipped down her cheeks, not from pain alone, but from the complexity of it all. Because now she knew it hadn't been one reason. It wasn't pure cowardice or cruelty. It was confusion. addiction, desperation. And beneath it all, a love too broken to be lived out properly. She reopened it, flipping through page after page, reading until the sun began to rise. Not because she was ready to forgive, but because she needed to understand. She needed to know if the man who sat before her now, ragged and remorseful, still carried pieces of the father who once pushed her toward the sky. And with every word, Amanda began to see. The absence had left scars, but the attempt to return was leaving a mark too. The next morning, Amanda sat across from him at the same bench where everything had unraveled just days before. Her expression was unreadable, calm, but not cold. The notebook was in her bag, zipped away like a secret she hadn't yet decided what to do with. "I read it," she said quietly. Her father nodded, as if he'd felt it in his bones. "All of it?" he asked. "Every word," she replied. He looked down, almost afraid to breathe. "And?" Amanda hesitated. "I don't have answers," she said. "It's not like reading it made everything click into place. It didn't fix anything. But it made me realize something." He waited. "I've spent years thinking you disappeared because I wasn't enough. Because I didn't matter. Because you didn't care. But that's not what your words say. They say you cared too much and didn't know how to stay without breaking me along the way." Her voice shook at the edges. "That doesn't make it okay, but it changes what I see when I look at you." Her father didn't try to justify. He didn't defend. He simply whispered, "Thank you for reading it." Amanda leaned back. "I don't know what you want from me," she admitted. "Forgiveness? A second chance? A place in my life again?" He looked at her, eyes raw with hope and fear. "I just want the truth," he said, "even if it hurts." She nodded. "Then here it is. I'm tired of carrying this alone. I'm tired of pretending I don't wonder where you were, who you became, or why you never came back." Her voice broke. "I don't know if I can trust you. I don't know if we can build anything out of the wreckage. But for some reason, I want to try." He swallowed hard. "That's all I've ever hoped for." A long silence fell between them, dense, honest, full of years unspoken. Amanda didn't offer a hug. He didn't ask for one. But when they stood, they walked in the same direction. Not side by side, not hand in hand, but close enough that neither felt alone anymore. And for the first time, that was enough. Not a resolution, but a beginning. That evening, Amanda found herself doing something she hadn't done in years. She cooked for two. It wasn't anything elaborate, just a simple pasta dish and warm bread. But there was intention in every movement. She didn't tell him to come over. She didn't call or text. But somehow, an hour later, there was a quiet knock at the door. He stood there holding nothing but the same look in his eyes he had at the bench. Uncertain, humble, human. Amanda stepped aside, wordlessly letting him in. It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't closure, but it was space. And space, she was starting to learn, could be more powerful than either. They ate mostly in silence, the kind of silence that didn't feel heavy but careful, like walking barefoot over broken glass. At one point, he complimented the food, and she smiled without realizing it. When they finished, she cleared the plates, and he asked if he could help. She nodded. And in that quiet rhythm, passing dishes, drying forks, there was something sacred. Not redemption, not reunion, but presence. When the kitchen was clean, they sat in the living room, neither rushing the moment nor expecting it to stretch into anything more than what it was. He glanced around, eyes settling on a photo of Amanda as a child. Missing teeth, arms raised toward the sky, frozen in joy. "You were always brave," he said softly. Amanda looked at the picture, then at him. "I had to be." His eyes welled up, but he didn't let the tears fall. "Not yet. I missed everything," he whispered. "First steps, first heartbreak, all of it." Amanda's voice was steady. You missed a lot, but not everything. You're here now." The words surprised even her. She hadn't planned to say them. But as they sat in that room filled with both history and hope, she realized something deeper. Healing doesn't always arrive as a loud declaration. Sometimes it tiptoes in as a quiet presence, asking nothing, offering only time. And in that time, Amanda saw not the man he had been, or even the one he was now, but the man who showed up. And sometimes that was the only beginning life gave you, the choice to open the door, even after it had been shut for so long. Weeks passed, and the visits continued. Not every day, not with promises or expectations, just a quiet rhythm between two people relearning how to be in the same space. Amanda never used the word dad, and he never asked her to. Instead, they existed in fragments, shared meals, occasional phone calls, stories slowly unfolding like worn pages finally being turned. One Sunday morning, Amanda invited him to walk through the local farmer's market. It wasn't a grand gesture, just something simple. They wandered past stalls of fresh flowers, homemade jams, and hand-woven scarves. He pointed at things she liked before she said a word, small signs that somehow he still remembered pieces of her. She noticed how he held doors open, how he spoke gently to older vendors, how he smiled when children passed by with sticky hands and wide eyes. For a man who had lived in silence for so long, he carried an unexpected gentleness now, one that didn't ask to be praised. As they sat with cups of coffee on a bench shaded by vines, Amanda found herself laughing at something he said. It wasn't forced. It wasn't out of pity. It was genuine, and it startled her. Not just the sound of her own laughter, but how natural it felt, like it had been waiting. He noticed, too. "I haven't heard that in a long time," he said. She looked at him, the lines in his face deeper now, his eyes still searching for her approval. "Neither have I," she admitted. Silence returned, but not the kind that ached. This one settled in gently, like the end of a long story that didn't need a perfect ending, just a true one. Amanda knew she hadn't forgotten the past. She never would. But she also realized something she'd never considered before. Forgiveness isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a soft decision, made again and again, each time someone shows up. She didn't know if she would ever call him Dad again. But she knew this. He was no longer a stranger with a notebook and a shadowed past. He was a man, sitting beside her, sharing coffee and silence and stories yet to be written. And that, for now, was enough. That evening, Amanda pulled the notebook from her drawer once again. Not out of doubt this time, but something quieter. Closure. She traced the cover with her fingers and noticed for the first time how worn the edges were, how many times she had opened it, read it, held it like an anchor and a weight all at once. She didn't need it anymore. Not because she had forgotten what was inside, but because it now lived in her. Every memory, every broken sentence, every attempt at honesty had carved a place inside her, no longer as wounds, but as rooms. She took out a pen and opened to the last page, where there had once been a half-written sentence. She stared at it, then slowly began to write. "I don't know if I believe in perfect endings, but I believe in second beginnings. I believe that some people lose their way, not because they stop loving, but because they never learned how to stay." She paused, the silence of her apartment wrapping around her like a soft quilt. Then she added, "You hurt me, but you also taught me how deeply I can heal. And maybe, just maybe, that's what we're both here to learn now." When she finished, she closed the notebook and placed it back in the drawer. Not to forget, but to rest. She stood by the window watching the street below bathed in warm evening light. Across from her building she saw her father sitting on the bench they had met at weeks earlier. He didn't see her. He was simply sitting, looking up at the sky as if trying to read something only he could see. Amanda didn't wave. She didn't call out. She just watched, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel the ache of absence. She felt something else. Presence. A quiet, resilient presence that no longer begged for answers. Because sometimes, the most healing thing isn't knowing why someone left. It's realizing they came back. And stayed. Amanda turned from the window, took a deep breath, and exhaled. The chapter had closed, not with a slam, but with a whisper. And tomorrow would begin, not in pain, but in peace. The next day, Amanda returned to the same park, alone this time. The air was crisp, the kind that made every breath feel like something sacred. She sat on the familiar bench, the one where everything had started, and closed her eyes for a moment. No footsteps behind her, no voice calling her name. Just silence and wind. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. Inside was a photo she had found tucked in the back of the notebook, one she hadn't noticed before. It was old, faded, and creased at the edges. A picture of her as a toddler on her father's shoulders, both of them laughing, eyes squinting in the sunlight. It didn't look like a man planning to vanish. It looked like a man who didn't yet know how much he was about to lose. Amanda stared at it for a long time, then gently placed it on the bench beside her. A quiet offering. Not to erase the years lost, but to honor the moments that had survived. A child's joy, a father's smile, a truth too complicated for words. She didn't expect him to find it. She didn't even know if she wanted him to, but leaving it there felt right, as if she were returning something borrowed from memory, a piece of herself she had carried too long. She stood up, took one final look at the photo, then walked away. Not with bitterness, not with regret, but with peace. The kind that comes only after you've stopped waiting for the past to apologize and started allowing the present to matter. Her story hadn't turned into some fairy tale reunion. No grand reconciliations, no perfect words spoken, but she had something better. A reclaimed sense of self. The power to say, "This happened. It broke me, and I lived anyway." As she disappeared into the rhythm of the city, the bench remained behind, quiet, still, holding the photo like a fragile truth under the sun. Some stories don't need to be shouted to be real. Some healings don't need to be complete to be enough. And some daughters don't need to be saved. They just need to be seen. Amanda, at last, had been.